From its depths, a hideous cry erupted, piercing the hearts of every living creature in the area. Are you brave enough to peer over the edge and discover the secret of the well? Hi, my name's Maddie, and today we're building an ancient well. If you're familiar with Frostgrave, you'll know the 20 scenarios that come with the second edition, and that one of them features a well. I want to work through all the scenarios and make custom terrain, so this seemed like a good place to start. So first, some planning. Or not, actually this was a backup build. I had started another project that drove me nuts, but will hopefully feature in a video soon. So no plans, just stress-free improvisation. My favourite. First step was to grab some leftover foam core that was in a sort of square and trace a circle with a tracing compass. This will be my guide for laying the bricks. These bricks are from a practice session on my homemade wire cutter table. It may feature in a video in the future. They're easy to cut with a knife as well if you don't have a foam wire cutter. I used my dollar store tacky glue and a quick dry fit to check the orientation and number of bricks needed, and then stuck them all down. There are huge gaps, but that's okay because I have a plan. I thought it was a bit underwhelming, so I quickly grabbed two other bits of foam core offcuts, glued them together and made another level of big stone steps. I glued the well onto this extra level and cut slits every 2 centimeters to start the process of creating the stone slabs. I used the grid on my cutting mat a lot and it came into play here. Are you not going to take the paper off the foam core and rub rolled up foil all over it for texture, I hear you cry? No. Instead, I'm going with an old arts and crafts method of laying down toilet paper soaked in PVA and water. I first tried to drown it using a syringe, but this was one of those I made a mess so you don't have to moments. I switched to a larger size 6 brush to apply the glue, and this gave me fantastic control. The bumps and texture were perfect, and it sank nicely into the grooves I had cut and widened with a pen tip to create big stone slabs. The paper also filled in all those large gaps between my foam bricks really nicely. Painting was where I hoped to really pull this all together. I didn't want to use washes and instead relied on pre-shading with my airbrush. After a grey primer, first was a top-down layer of white, not much, just a little. Then some black over the stone gaps and in the spaces between the bricks. Blue ink from an almost 17-year-old bottle of Citadel ink was next. I hadn't worked with this stuff through an airbrush and stupid me didn't thin it down. I used up most of the bottle on this little step. Lesson learned. But it looks so good. This will be a dry brush free project as well as a wash free one, so stippling with foam was the order of the day. I used 2 colours, a warmer stipple of Desert Yellow from Vallejo and then some cooler Glacier Blue from their game range. I was pretty chuffed with the result. Okay, so every well needs a structure to hang a rope and pulley for the bucket from. I wanted this piece to look like it could have sat next to Stonehenge and kept the partying druids hydrated, so I went for big pieces of foam to create a frame. My previous failed project was all about incorporating elements of brutalist architecture to gaming terrain. I love how some brutalist buildings have a fantasy element to them, like how that slab of concrete is holding itself up, or what on earth is supporting that staircase floating on the side of the building. This toilet paper and glue texture is what I'm hoping will tie larger pieces of foam together to bring an old world feel to the shapes of brutalist architecture. But that will feature more in the future. Today, it's all about improvising and testing. These columns were supposed to be far more like a trapezoid, and I wanted them to have a thin bottom, tapering up to a larger top, to look like they're magically supported upside down almost. I didn't really cut them well, but I know what I want to do in the future to achieve the look. I cut and widened some grooves to simulate gaps between stone pieces, and tried to glue it all together. I didn't leave it long enough for the glue to dry, so instead I applied the toilet paper while it was in 3 pieces. I then repeated the painting process, only adding in some extra white highlights with the airbrush in the center of the stones. I could then pin them with the toothpicks I was using as holders, and I left them overnight for the glue to set properly. Next experiment was some acrylic water texture from Vallejo, the still water bottle. I poured it into the well at the maximum recommended depth of 3mm, and after letting it sit for 24 hours, I concluded that it's a good product for shadow pours. It did shrink and contract, even at the shallow depth of 3mm, so I'll probably only do 1mm pours from now on with this stuff. More like coating than a deep water look. That's a good experiment though. Now I'm from Australia, mate, in case the accent didn't give it away. And I haven't seen snow since I was maybe 6 years old, and even then it wasn't amazing. So snow isn't something I have a good working knowledge of, and it shows. Reference photos help, but I really need to get better at applying the effect. One consideration I made was checking where the pillars will be in relation to the well, and not putting snow under the pillars, where they would have loomed over the space. I used some Geek Gaming Scenics Dead Grass Tufts for more texture. I like the contrasting warmer tones of the yellow grass, and I placed them in the grooves of the stone and along the edges of the steps. And here it is. I haven't attached the archway yet because I still need to attach a pulley system and a bucket. I'll make a video in the future about some of the extra elements I plan to 3D print and attach to some of my existing builds. I'm super stoked with the toilet paper texture and the blue ink. I'll keep this technique for the rest of the Frostgrave terrain. I think it will work really well once I'm able to achieve the brutalist architecture shapes I have in mind. But I'm very happy with this little piece. So here are some pretty images of the terrain set, and if you liked what I did here, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you can catch next week's video. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down and tell me why it was crap in the comments. See ya.